Hello, this is Tom Levecki with New Theory Magazine, and I have a very, very special guest today, Jon Alite, who is the former enforcer for the Gottis and the Gambino crime family. Jon Alite, how are you doing today?
Good, Tom. Actually, I'm on vacation. I'm down in Florida, jet skiing, and it's about 90 degrees, so good day.
Nice. Now, I appreciate you spending your vacation with our listeners from newtheory.com. With that being said, okay, I want to kind of jump in. And we're a little bit more of a millennial-focused magazine. However, millennials still love The Godfather, still love, Goodfellas and all those kind of movies. So I want to start off with maybe the glory days of the mob. Why don't you talk a little about how you got involved? Maybe I hate to say this, some of the stuff, how it was like The Godfather, how it wasn't, and then what was kind of the beginning of the end. So walk us through a little bit about that, Jon.
Well, the early days were the exposure through my uncle, through my baseball coach, Albert Ruggiano, whose father was Fat Andy Ruggiano, who was the captain that ran our neighborhood in Ozone Park, Woodhaven area. So those were some different days when I was a kid, and, I really looked up to the idea of the mob was like, back in those days was fascinating as a young kid.
Correct.
And watching these guys smoking cigars and throwing around money. And it was the era of the movies like you just said, like The Godfather, where guys were old-time gentlemen and different mindset.
Okay, so now give us an example. So obviously you grew up around it. You kind of got hooked in, the old adage, money, fame, and local fame, probably getting a restaurant you want to get into, the girls and the whole bit, right? So now, walk us through like the heyday of the mob, like the '80s. Like, what was it like to be a gangster? What were some of the accoutrements that you got by being connected?
Well, you got leadership like back in the early '80s with guys like Paul Castellano. That it's a name that's forgotten over the years, and the younger generation don't even know who he is. But this is what I saw anyway as a young kid, is looking up to the mob and the world of money, glamour, and prestige. You got a guy like Paul Castellano who's bringing in $100 million,
Wow.
a month like it's nothing. So
Wow.
The guy was an incredible earner. He's a gentleman, well-spoken, a businessman, and you look at him as just that, as a businessman. And that era of gangster was smaller versions of Paul Castellano as far as, what I could see and idolize and wanted to be like.
Wow. So the money was real. So it's a business, right? So obviously you saw Paul Castellano. Obviously he lived in Staten Island. I remember, I think they called him the Pope, and he lived in the White House.
Right.
Very similar to the White House of Washington, right?
Yeah, he's a guy that, when you're looking, like, you want to copycat him. Because you're looking at a guy that is well-spoken, well-dressed, manicured, and he's a guy that's respected in the business world, not just in the city, throughout the world. I mean, this is a legitimate earner, a guy that goes into businesses and knows how to make money. And you're looking at him, and when you see him, he's a figure that obviously you don't get to see him too often, especially in my younger days. But when you do see him, or you do hear about him, or you hear another mobs are talking about him, you're looking up to him as somebody would look up to an actor, actress, or a ball player. And for our neighborhood, he was king.
So obviously things were strong back then. So I'm fascinated by the business aspect as well. Okay, so give us, the different streams of revenue you'd make, and if it's okay, if you could share, kind of a little bit of how you did it and what kind of money were you raking in back then? What was it, drugs? Was it gambling? So, how did you manage your business as a businessman, right? How much, again, what type of business was it in? And what kind of money are we talking about?
Well, you're looking at guys, again, like, Paul, and different guys like Paul that were in different aspects of business, whether it's, Western Beef or, owning supermarkets like Key Food. And these were all mob-owned and mob-controlled businesses. So you're looking at these guys and you're trying to copycat what they're doing. On the quiet, down low, we know that everybody's in, sports business, drug business, loan shark business. And the thing that I took out of the mob was, I'm not going to be a typical, kind of like somebody like a movie character. You talk like Al Pacino and Scarface. A typical drug dealer, that's out there shooting guys making money and a dummy. So you wanted to be more of a businessman. So I would take my money, and one of the first businesses I started to go into was the nightclub business. And I started finding, because I knew it was a cash business, it's a service business. So I wanted to be in a cash business like the parking companies, like the nightclub business, where it's a service business, it's entertainment, and it's an everlasting business. People want to go out, people want to drink, and people need to park their cars wherever they go. So I jumped into those businesses with starters, and then I went into other industries that I didn't know so well, but I had the cash to go buy property, buildings. Like I bought a place down in Tampa called Window Sales. I cashed out the building and bought it cash, and everything that comes in is revenue is going into my pocket. I opened up a window business, car glass business, and also commercial for home, residential and home glass. And that money legitimized me, and my parking companies and my nightclub legitimized me as a guy that I looked up to. Different gangsters that were actual businessmen, where you could sit down, eat dinner, use credit cards, and it was the cash would go somewhere else, whether it's to buy cars or buy a house and mortgage it up and then pay it off in cash and do your interior work with cash. You learn to understand, to maneuver your money in different ways, but you wanted people to respect you, not fear you. And the fear comes along with the territory of making money and the other stuff that's going on in your life, the violence. But your real goal is to put on a suit and tie, go out to the swanky places, get treated right, and be a businessman. And that's what you wanted to be known as.
Got it. Now, so let's be candid. You made your money probably some gambling rackets. Obviously, you did admit to possibly doing drugs, and you kind of made money illegally. How did that work? Did you kind of get your money, kind of get out and dump it into legal stuff and then roll it out that way? Or was the money too good on the legal side where you had to say, damn, I'm making that so much money, I can't cut it off, it's just too much bread? How did you balance that out?
No, you would take your illegal money, and listen, the majority of this money is coming from drugs, obviously.
Yeah.
And that's where all the money's at. I mean, we're also in the sports business. We're also in the loan shark business. We're also hijacking and, other crimes, washing money for drug checks and, different things like that. But the sale of drugs is where your money's at. And if you're half-witted, you know to put it into business. And, you can carry that business and make sure it gets off. So, if a business is struggling a little bit, you're making so much illegal money in cash that you can carry the business until it does get off and promote it. So, one of the things is when I got indicted I was indicted for RICO racketeering for illegal enterprises. And those illegal enterprises were my parking companies and my nightclub business and my window business. And I would just keep funneling my illegal drug money into the legal businesses and be able to pull out checks, be able to build your credit, be able to turn around and open up other business legitimately through the banking system.
All right, so I know this is obvious. You got to remember, I am a civilian when it comes to this life. I'm fascinated with it nevertheless, but I'm a civilian. You see the Gotti movie kind of portrayed Carlo Gambino specifically saying, if you deal, you die, right? So is this the type of thing where the made guys would not do it and use associates to do it and turn a blind eye? Or are made men also, doing and selling drugs and just everybody's doing it and it's bullshit that, that there's a rule or there's not a rule? Talk us through that, because the Godfather makes it look like the Italian mafia does not do drugs. Meanwhile, it's probably some of the biggest drug dealers. So walk us through how that dynamic works.
Well, if you remember the Godfather, Marlon Brando, there was a famous scene when he was refusing, the Corleone family was refusing to sell drugs, and his lawyer was Tom Hayden.
Tom Hagen, yes.
And he advises Marlon Brando that they need to change with the times, and they're going to have no choice but to go into the drug business because everybody else is in the drug business. And that's really a fact of what went on. Everybody that, I can list mobster after mobster made guys that were bosses, under bosses, and down that were in the drug business. So the fallacy of made guys and bosses and different people and associated with the mob weren't in the drug business is almost, laughable, to even deny that at this point. There's too much history and too many guys that came in and spoke about it and were involved in it. and they give up the intricacies of the drug business and how we were bringing in different ways, from the French Connection to the Pizza Connection to other schemes that have been going on in large scales to that effect. And then you got the smaller drug schemes that are going on through each country that are funneling into this country. So everybody knows there's millions and millions and billions of dollars that are in that business, that industry. So where there's money, is where you're going to see street guys and guys maneuvering.
Now, you brought up the Pizza Connection, and I read the book, and that's actually, most of those guys were at Knickerbocker Avenue. I think it was at in Brooklyn, and then some of those guys were also at Queens as well. What's that relation? So obviously the Sicilians back then were importing a ton of heroin, I think in the tune of $1.6 billion, and they were working with, obviously, the local Italian mob. What's the connection there? Like, when you were, let's say you're out in the city and you run into a Sicilian guy, is it like known? Are you guys kind of partners with those guys? Do they do their thing, you do your thing? What's the connection between like the old school Sicilian guys that may be operating here in the U.S. versus maybe the knockaround guy who's Brooklyn born? What's that relationship? Because I was always kind of fascinated by that dynamic.
Well, to me, the Sicilian ways of the mob were more successful than the American mob. The American mob, I think, brings down the ability and the structure of the mob by the way they behave, the way they talk, the way they act. In Italy, on the other side, they're more quiet, they're more laid back, and they're more violent. But more violent only when it's necessary, and they lead by their violence, and they intimidate, and they make their money. But they stay to their code as far as the way they move drugs and things that are coming in and out of this country over the years were destroyed more on this side, on the American side, than on their side. Whatever deal is cut, whether it's 50%, 50-50, whatever that deal is set by whoever's running that operation. So to really say a set way of things being run from one country to another, I don't think there really is a set way, depending on who you're doing business with and the type of business you're doing and who you're doing it with. So, but the operation itself is, again, old school is the Sicilian ways of being quiet, laid back, and keeping your mouth shut and doing business in a different manner. I think that old aspect when the mob was here in the 80s, 70s, back in the old days when the mob was really the mob, but things changed now to the newer generation, and I think they, at this point, watered it down to the effect and the way they run things, and they want to be seen and they want to be like the John Gottis of the world is what killed the mob. So, what they needed was the old school attitude of Carlo Gambino and Angelo Bruno from Philly and, Paul Castellanos. I mean, that type of mobster is gone. I mean, you don't see it anymore, and that's one of the problems with the mob now. And the respect factor has diminished. The capacity of someone saying they're a mobster now and somebody being intimidated is diminished to 95% because of some of these things that they do and some of the stuff that the mafia crews, families are putting up with that they wouldn't put up with years ago. So it's a big change in the lifestyle, and I think along with that is the prestige of the mob world, and it's like a known thing these days. Years ago, it was quiet, it was unsaid, and I think everybody lost that when they wanted magazines, and Gotti came out with all this crap that destroyed it. Well, helped destroy it in a faster way.
Well, you bring up a good point. Let's get to the obvious. So, like John Gotti, in terms of history, is and can't be compared, but at least is spoken in the same breath as like an Al Capone or like Luciano. I'm not saying he was at that level, but in terms of fame, that's what he was about, right? So know him firsthand. Yeah, so tell us about who John Gotti Sr. really was, not what they portrayed him as. What was he really, how was he really like? And I know millennials know that name, John Gotti, so tell us a little bit about how he was, because that's pretty interesting to our listeners.
Well, the media needed somebody to depict it as an Al Capone. He fit that role because he did have charisma. He did dress the part, but he wasn't the part. So he wanted the media attention, so he fit. So the media used the guy that wanted the attention. They craved it. But he didn't crave, like he said, his words were of this existing forever when he dies. But he didn't live by those rules at all. His rules were, not protecting his men. None of them. Anybody that was killed, he didn't protect them. He blamed his men like Angelo Ruggiero or Sammy Gravano, it didn't matter who, or his brother Gene Gotti when there was an issue. So this isn't a great leader. This isn't a follower. This is a guy who claims he had nothing to do with drugs, but everybody around him were either locked up, pinched for drugs, and selling drugs, and yet he blamed them. So either he's one of the dumbest bosses ever not to know that these guys were drug dealers. And because you're talking about his brother, his best friends, his confederates, like Gene Gotti and Johnny Caniglia and Eddie Lino, and that list goes on, and Mark Ryder, Sal Ruggiero, Angelo Ruggiero. These are all his main guys. How did you know they're not dealing drugs? So obviously you're in the drug business, and when you're crying and bitching about your men, it only shows a weakness. When you have a weakness for gambling, that means you have a weakness in your life. So he was a degenerate gambler. These are not qualities of a strong leader. This isn't a guy that puts on a suit and tie in his pants. And I think one of the worst things that ever happened to the mob was Paul Castellano being killed. Because once that was done, the structure started dying with it. And you got to blame all the families for not taking care of business immediately. That week, whether it was one guy, 10 guys, or 200 guys, Gotti was supposed to go after plotting that Paul Castellano hit. It was never done. And I think if that ever occurred in Italy, obviously, that would have been taken care of immediately. So this country ran things a lot weaker than, Italy would run things, than Sicily specifically. So, those things were key components of the downfall of the American mafia here in the United States.
So basically, poor leadership, not following the rules, and probably like double standards, saying, "Hey, if you deal drugs, I'm going to kill you." Meanwhile, half your revenue, or more than half your revenue, comes from there. What's your maybe funniest or not so funny John Gotti story that you want to share? Because again, I don't want to make this too much about him, and I want to move on to some of the stuff you got cooking. But I'd love to hear a good John Gotti Sr. story if you have one.
Well, listen, John Gotti had some good qualities too. I mean, he was a fun guy to go out with, to drink with. He was a good partier. Like I said, he was likable. He had certain things about him, aspects that was, a funny thing. But he was a degenerate gambler, and he couldn't win. So when the guy finally did win, he bet some races, and he gave about $50,000 to Jimmy Irish to put on some horses for him, and he finally hit big. And Jimmy Irish was taking that money on a regular basis, OTB, and to the track, and John never won. So on this one occasion, he's so excited that he won, and he finds out Jimmy Irish pocketed the money, never put the bets in because he didn't think he'd win again. He just thought he was going to lose again. And John went crazy, and Jimmy was hiding for weeks at a time, and everybody was, and he finally got over it. And, and he did have a soft spot for the guy. I mean, otherwise I think he would have been, found like some other guys were found. But it was really kind of funny because it just shows you like in a Bronx Tale mush when they used to throw the guy in the bathroom.
Yeah.
He just can't win. Even when he does win, he's just a hard luck, degenerate gambler. And that's what happens when you're degenerate. You can't win. The guys that don't need the money and the guys that are gambling and, they don't care if they win or lose, they'll throw 100 dimes on a game, on a horse, on a lottery ticket. They seem to win because they don't really care. It's the guys that are really hard luck, degenerate gamblers that never seem to win, even when they do win, like in that situation. So it's Now, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm actually a little intrigued by this. So I'm guessing, right, like anything, he's not going to Vegas. He's doing it illegally, right? So does he maybe go to one of his Gambino makers, or did he go with one of his own guys and bet big? And my second question is, when he would lose, would he stiff him because he's the boss, or the opposite? He kind of had to pay, so he wants to set a good example. How did that dynamic work when the boss is throwing the bets around? Well, we were in the sports business with Willie Boy Johnson. That was Gotti's partner. And I was also on a half sheet with Willie, so I dealt with him on a regular basis. John went to every bookmaker in the city, and he would lose with every bookmaker in the city, and Willie would bitch about it because he didn't want to pay him. And then Willie would have to handle that situation, and later on, Willie Boy Johnson is, found out to be a guy that was meeting with the feds and never took the stand. I mean, similar to what Gotti Jr.'s done. Not similar, exactly what Gotti Jr. did. And he would bitch about the money that Gotti Sr. was losing and not paying, and he would be responsible, and they would have to take it out of business. So Willie was, obviously struggling and having hard feelings about it, and that's one of the key components over the years, I think, that kept driving him to be an informant and being a CI and doing those 302s and sitting in rooms with agents and just what I said, just what Gotti Jr. was doing.
And that was his boy, and that was his boy, because I read the book and I understood a little bit about it, but that was his boy, right?
Yeah, that was his boy, and he had him murdered for that. So, I know, Gotti Sr.'s mindset obviously was around since a kid, and I know his mindset would be to do the same thing to his son if that was, if he was alive and he knew he was doing the same thing as Willie Boy Johnson. He did believe in the life. He might have had his double standards and different things, but he believed in life. He understood our rules, and even if he broke them, but he wouldn't break one of those. I mean, the guy died a rough death, and you got to say, whether you like him or not, he really went out tough, and he did what he did, and he might not have been the greatest leader that we see, but he didn't do nothing what his son did, obviously.
Now, in all fairness, because we talked a little bit about Junior for a second, and like I said, we'll get to what you got going on as well. In all fairness, you were very close with John Gotti Jr., and they kind of took over during you were part of that regime, right? So they took over in 85, 86, whatever it was, and then you were kind of hooked up with them. Let's be candid. You did pretty well by being on the team for a while. So I'm guessing that. So walk us through how did your life change when those guys kind of got the head seat? How did it change for the positive or worse? What how did you handle it, and then when did it start to decline?
Well, I came around 81 initially, and Genie Gotti, I believe, was made around 77, and Senior about 78, something like that. And then the reign begins, and Junior gets made in about 88, Christmas Eve. Later on, Richie Gotti gets made, Pete Gotti gets made, I think a year, around the same time as Junior, a year before or after. I'm not really sure right now, off the top of my head. But I was around during that reign with every one of these guys, and I was very close, and I started having a personal falling out with Gotti Jr. after he's an acting boss in about 92. And we worked together from that, but things were different after that. But, I was there the whole time through the beginning of the Gotti reign to the end. And, we all, especially me, I mean, I was a violent guy for them. I was involved with them, and I can't say, I'd be a liar to say that I didn't make a ton of money because I was with the Gotti family while they had the reign. I said, of course I did. But I was also the guy that was doing a lot of work for them to give us that power. So, when you have violent guys around, and we're all earning, the 80s were strong earning years for anybody who was on the street, not just mobsters, drug dealers, gang members. It was an open world, not like now. Now you have GPSs, you have telephones that are tracked, you have cameras in every corner, cameras in front of buildings. I mean, to get away with anything now, it's almost impossible. So it's changed the structure of how to make money and how violent you can be. And you can be violent, but you're going to get caught. I don't see too much violence because there's no way you're going to get away with it with all these cameras out there these days.
Now, you were also unique in your book, which I'm a huge fan of. I would love to have you plug it in a second. But you're unique because you were hooked up, and not just the Italian mafia locally in New York, but you knew cartel guys, you knew guys in Cuba, you knew guys in Brazil. How do you get hooked up with those guys? And then, for example, do they have a relationship with the local mafia? Walk us through how you got kind of hooked up with the cartels and the Cubans and that kind of stuff. And then how did that relate or translate back to the Gottis?
Well, I was best friends. I went out with a girl that's brother was as a kid that was running the Hells Angels. He's become the president of the Hells Angels. Pepe just passed away. So respect to him, obviously, his family for him passing away. And so I was very friendly with them. I was friendly with different black groups from the street because of who I'm still very friendly with that were running drugs with me. And we kept a rapport over the years, and we're still in touch with each other. And then I became, Albanian, and my heritage, and a lot of the people, the Albanian friends of mine, family, that are throughout the world, and especially, what drove me back to Albania on a regular basis, that were gangsters. And, and I talk about my heritage all the time. So, that pull helped me around the world in different countries because of our culture and a European culture and being a violent culture. So it gave me access to different guys and different bosses across the world. And I went into the cartel. I was friendly with one of the bosses there through one of their sons. So it made me go over to Colombia, brought me over to Venezuela. In Cuba, I had some personal friends. And in Europe, I had a guy that I was in prison with that me and him hooked up early on in the late 80s, early 90s. And he had a good buddy that was in L.A., California, that I was moving drugs with. So we had connections. So, I developed connections from really being on the street. A lot of these mob guys aren't on the street like that. They might be involved as gangsters, but they don't have access to different groups. I had access to different groups, like the Latin Kings and different groups like that. And later on, different street gangs, whether they're black, white, Spanish, who I stayed in touch with, stayed friendly with. And over the years, we kept that rapport. Now I'm on a different track, obviously. And, I don't lecture those guys. Whatever they want to do is their business. We're still friends. But I look at it as, they're adults. And I've said this over and over. The kids is a different thing. I steer them away from this life. And, my goal is to keep them away from this life.
So, like I said, we'll get on to the books and the other fun stuff, but just categorically fascinated by all this. And if somebody's still listening to this, they are as well. So you're sitting at a table with a cartel guy, having a cigar, obviously I'm assuming you're buying product or distributing for them or doing something. Does the name John Gotti have any weight with those guys? Do they care about John Gotti? Do their business to John Gotti? Or he's just like a little fly on the wall to them? How does the mafia kind of relate to the cartel guys?
Well, I can relate it to prison. No one really cares who you are in prison. So you might have a little respect from your own group, and you might have a little respect from outside groups. But overall, if you disrespect anybody in any group, whether it's an AB and especially or any of the other groups we discussed or other
Aryan Brotherhood, okay, yeah.
Yeah, nobody cares. Whether the Yemis or Texas Syndicate, no one really cares. You disrespect their Bogota, their thing, they're going to take care of business. They don't care what your name is. So outside this country, no, nobody cares. I mean, you go to Albania, they don't even know the name, half of them. So, and nobody really cares who you are, and especially in Albanian culture. They're proud, most, I'd say most are very proud. And there's a couple, like, just what happened with me recently, where they go against their code and their people. And, there's weak and there's cowards through the world and through history and different cultures. So you're going to run into those guys. But then you have great leaders, like I talk about Ramush, that was the Prime Minister of Kosovo, that's in jail in Paris. And I have to keep mentioning him because that's the pride of our country. A guy like that guy that actually, sacrifices his life, his family's lives, and he comes out and he's true to what he believes. And in his heart, if you could cut his skin open and it's his heart, you'll see a Albanian flag there. So, the people that we know or that we know each other and his family that I'm in contact with, they know how we feel about this. So I think that, if you go unilaterally through the rest of the world, no one really cares what's going on in some other part of the country, in other countries. They care about what's going on with our own people, their people. And if somebody disrespects that name doesn't mean anything to them.
All right. So this is some good stuff, and we're definitely going to do a follow-up interview because I probably have 1,000 more questions. But talk us about the book that you have out now, and then also share with us what else you're working on. And then lastly, talk a little bit about how you change your life and you're actually working to help kids out.
Well, I'm working on some projects with Top Cat Productions, and that's a good friend of mine that I grew up with, and he's the president of the company. And we're involved in several projects, TV projects, series, shows, and some other major movie films. I'm also putting a book out called Prison Rules. It's a follow-up to the book I had out, Gotti's Rules with George Anastasia. It was a New York Times bestseller. And awesome. Gotti's Rules has been out there for a couple of years now. Prison Rules will be about different aspects of what you go through personally, your family goes through mentally, emotionally, physically in jails, the superseding indictments, the possible cooperation of your co-defendants, the real world of prison, what goes on with guards, inmates, whether they're ball players, Wall Street guys, college students that are selling drugs, or gangsters. And, you get some opinions of all them dirty police that were locked up and arrested, like a guy like Michael Dowd for the 75 Precinct, famous documentary. If somebody looks him up, he's a personal friend of mine over the years. And, some of those aspects and It dives into, the mental stability of myself, other people, therapists talking, and you get different aspects and opinions of the prison system, what it is to be poked and pried and prodded as far as, bending over, checking your cavities, whether it's your mouth, whether checking what's, down your pants, up your pants, and some of that degrading stuff that goes on, being four-pointed, some of the things that went on in riots, Brazil penitentiaries I was in. So it covers the whole thing of the prison system and the life. And it's kind of to me, it's a very interesting book. It doesn't specifically talk about one person or group or myself, actually. It just dives into the whole aspect of the system, how it works, and what goes on with it.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic.
And then I got a movie. What's that? I got a movie.
No, go ahead, John. Sorry.
It's okay. I got a movie that's coming out called The Perfect Gangster. It's in Albania now. Andy Deliano is the director, producer of the film with Digital in Albania. It's going to be a Balkan film, and I think it's going to be moved to different parts of different countries in England, Australia, and elsewhere in the world. And that series is supposed to be coming out in a couple of weeks now, I believe. I think they're doing their first television previews on that in the next couple of weeks in Albania.
Fantastic. Now, maybe shed a little light on some of the stuff you're doing with anti-bullying and kids.
Well, I get a lot of feedback from schools, whether it's high schools, colleges, juvenile centers. I've worked with some wardens of juvenile centers, restart programs with Queens, Montgomery Township, PA. I worked on one-on-one projects with some kids that were in trouble there. And I do internet one-on-ones. I do classrooms. And what I do is talk about the reality of the loyalty of this life. And I go back and forth through some of the stories of what guys have done to their best friends that were, mob-related, gang-related, setting them up, killing them for money, not helping them when they're in prisons, turning on them. And the realities that kids don't see of the life is just like I got trapped into it, and I became a violent guy, and I was in and out of prisons. And, I try to talk to kids about not becoming part of the cycle of in and out of jail, part of what their fathers possibly did, and change their life and give them some hope to go in the right direction. And I don't want to be one of those guys that is going to glamorize the pain and suffering that everybody felt in this life. I don't care if you're a Latin King. I don't care if you're an AB. I don't care if you're a mob guy or a Blood or a Crip. Their family members, their sons, fathers that either were killed or, put in jail, or their families without parents. I mean, that's the reality of the life that no one sees. They only see the good part, the money, and they don't see guys like, and I used them the other day, Jimmy Catacamo, that goes to jail and he goes right into suicide watch for 4 months. And then he'll walk around the street like he did his time. I go, it's a lie, and I want kids to know it's a lie. And there's nothing wrong that he did go into that suicide watch. I want to make that straight. I say, I happen to personally not like him, but then don't play that role. Come out and try to talk to kids, try to help kids. Don't get in touch with Gotti and think you're a half a gangster when you're not. Either is he. He was a rat. You're a rat. And say what it is. Say that you were cooperating. He's one of the guys, when the FBI went to him, he says, well, I'll just rat on Johnny Alite like everybody else did and stay out of jail. Or, any of these guys. Johnny Burke that was cooperating with the government, could get his deal cut. And, he's portraying that he got a life sentence. Well, you did get a life sentence out of stupidity, but you also are cooperating. You went in before all these guys, and these kids got to know this stuff, because not that I'm outing these guys, because I want the kids to understand the treachery of the life, how they're lying, how they're deceiving, how they're not telling the truth, how I'll openly say I was in cells crying. That's part of the life. When someone says they didn't cry, they're lying. Somebody tells me Gotti didn't sit in his cell and cry. He may not do it publicly, but personally he did it, and there's nothing wrong with that. He's a human being. There's nothing wrong with what I did. I'm a human being. But the kids don't see that aspect of the suffering, and they need to see it to keep them away from this life. Somebody's got to say it. I got a lot of people don't like what I'm saying, but I really don't care, because I'm going to save some kids' lives. I'm going to make sure they don't suffer through some of the stuff that we did. I says, whatever position you are in this life, because anybody who has a child, any street guy, any gang member, anybody, if they have a half a heart, wouldn't put their kid on the street, and they would want me to talk to their children. I said, not the opposite. Anybody says something different than that, as well as I do, and the public knows, then they're lying. Nobody wants their kid in this life. And if you're stupid enough, like Ronnie One-Arm Trucchio did, put his son in the life and ruin the kid's life. He's not a gangster. He's not a street guy. He doesn't know the street. He's not a tough guy. You put him in the street, and you got the kid 10, 12 years. I says, that's what you did to him. That's not what a father does to their son. They put him in the right direction. They don't put him in the street, and people need to notice and see this. And this is a guy also, if you check his paperwork, allocated to the existence of the mob, allocated to the existence of a position. That's a rat. That's our rules. You're not allowed to do that. He saved himself 2 years on a sentence supposedly by doing it, and he allocated and blamed me as being the top drug dealer, the killer for the Gambino family. His opening statement. He also blamed John Gotti Jr., who he said was a rat. So that's why he did it over him. So the saying of all this stuff makes people understand that this is treachery. That's what it's about. Save your own skin, and that's life. So when these guys are portraying something different because they got a life sentence, but they didn't tell you the rest, that they came in trying to cooperate, and people don't see it. I says the people that don't know about it, they need to be told about it. And these are just a handful. You got guys like Whitey Bulger that did it. You got Gas Pipe that did it. Bosses. You had Al Diaco that did it. You had Joe Messina, boss of the Bonanno family, that did it. And I can go on. There's so many guys that cooperated, bosses, top guys. So, when kids don't understand or they're too young to know who these names are, they need to know, and they got to be confronted and talked to so they don't follow this direction. They need to follow the direction of somebody like yourself that's in a business that's with education, with a purpose, something that's positive, not negative, and spread positivity, not negativity. There's a big difference in that.
That's a great point, John. I just got one last question, and I appreciate that you are turning your life around. You've been doing it for a few years, so it's not bullshit that you're just kind of doing this as a front. I know you did talks for free, numerous talks for free, and I know you see kids and get messages from throughout the world. I just kind of been reading a Wall Street Journal article recently that said actually the mob may be coming back a bit, and there's two reasons why. The first is a lot of guys that kind of got put away in the 80s are coming out, and some of them are still kind of the real deal. They have other ways to make money, so they're going to kind of pick up where they left off. And then secondly, the government, with their focus on terrorism, actually reduced the OC squad from 5 teams to 1 in New York City, where there was 200 guys kind of following 5,000 guys around, and now it's down to 20 FBI guys because of putting the resources towards terrorism. So do you think with the fact that some guys are getting out and there's maybe less OC coverage by the FBI, do you think there's a chance that the mob may resurge here in New York and the United States?
No, I think groups like the Russians are a little smarter. They're doing money crimes, mortgages, gasoline, oil, Wall Street, banking. They're smart guys. They're very intelligent. They do it through a computer. They don't do it through violence. They're making a ton of money, and they're doing it quietly. And the difference with these new guys that are coming home, they haven't been back in 15, 20, 30 years, 25 years. They're coming out to a technology-ridden country that you only need 10 FBI agents. You don't need 100 because those 10 don't have to follow 5,000 or 10,000 or 20,000 guys around, made guys and associates, because all they got to do is click on a computer and go from camera to camera, from street to street. So when crime's committed, they don't need to do that legwork anymore. The cameras are doing it for them. The computers are doing it for them. The GPSs are doing it for them. So it's not what everybody thinks. They don't have to see you directly with their eyes anymore. They still have their informants on the street, yes, but that's not even that important to them anymore because they have so much technology at their hands that they can go just grab a computer and they'll put a case together against anybody. Because think about it, if you're mad at a guy that lives a half a mile down the road and you go see him, when you leave your house, you better leave your phone there. When you leave your house, you better not take a GPS. If you take a fake plate on a car, police cars all over have those computers on the back of the cars that sees the car's a stolen car. Somebody has to steal that car for you. If you don't do it yourself, you got to trust several guys. You can't trust guys anymore. They're making guys in their underwear because they don't trust them. So why would you be straightening out guys you don't trust? So that is laughable, right? So, you're in a technology millennium where that these FBI agents don't need it. So if somebody's lucky enough to get to the location that somebody's at, now after they get away, after they commit the crime, they may be able to commit it. But how are they going to get away? They put a radius out. It's like escaping prison, and they do a mile radius in 4 different directions, north, south, east, and west. If they don't see what they need to see, they take it to the 2nd mile, to the 3rd mile, to the 5th mile. to the 10th mile. Eventually, you got to get out of that car. Eventually, you got to take that mask off. Eventually, you got to get into another car, and they're going to watch it all. So how do you get away with that? That's what technology did for the FBI. So the same way that they're combating terrorism, they're combating also mob-related crimes. And the reason why the arrest rates and the conviction rates are so high is because you have different technology now. So there's no way to combat that stuff, and things are changing.
That's a good point, John. So listen, this has been newtheory.com with Jon Alite, and if you have any parting words, feel free to share them now.
Yeah, I wanted to say something. A big thank you to Tim Fitzgerald. He's an attorney of mine, great guy, nice guy, very competent. And I always tell people, if you're ever in trouble of any sort, he's the guy, because it's not only he's a guy that has a heart. He's caring. He's not about money. And, everybody's got to make a living, but he's a guy that really is a gentleman and a guy that'll look out for you and not sell you down the river, and do it the right way with the class. And he's just a good guy. Doug Anton is my attorney and my agent for my legal stuff, and also for my movie business and things I'm doing in that nature. And my website is www.jonalite.com. So if anybody wants to know where I'm at and what I'm doing, I'm always on there, and I'm always posted. But I really appreciate you guys, and it's always good talking with you, Tom.
Anytime, John. Thank you very much. And this is Tom LaVecchia with newtheory.com.
Thank you.